Kia ora and good morning, everyone. Welcome, lovely to see you all here today. We are going to open our meeting with Karakia. Thank you, Councillor Wharehinga.
Kia ora, Your Worship. And just to give us context, actually, Councillor Faulkner was due to do our karakia this morning, but it's an apology. So I'm more than happy and honoured to do this on behalf of you. So me no i tātou te whānau. A manawa mai te mauri nuku, manawa mai te mauri rangi, kei ahau te mauri tipua, kei ahau te mauri tāwhiti, kei ahau te mauri no hea. No tiki tiki o rangi, no te wai oro, ro tāni te wai ora. Tēnei te mauri ka whakapiki, tēnei te mauri ka whakapaki. Tēnei te mauri ka puta ki te whai au ki te amarama, ki te matatauira e tuake. Uhi, wero, tau mai te mauri, haungi e hui e tāki.
Thank you for that. Okay, we do have a few apologies to pass through. I have Councillor Dowsing, Faulkner, Hughes, and we might have Councillor Warsnop's apologies. She's unwell. Moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Akuata Brown. All in favour? Contrary, carried. Do I have any declarations of interest for today? If none, I'm going to take you to our minutes, which is on page 5 of 276. Please take a quick look. Moved by Councillor Burdett, seconded by Councillor Sheldrake. Any questions or queries in regards to our minutes? If none, I'll put it all in favour. Contrary, carried. Let's go to our action sheet on page 10. There's an update there. So Dr. Magnus updated, it will be done in November. So thank you for that. Then on to our new layout of our governance work plan, which we saw yesterday for the first time. And today it's lovely to see the consistency through all the agendas. Just aware of what we will do and how we will do it and who's the owner of those projects. Thank you for that, Nadine. No leave of absence, acknowledgements and tributes. Nikki Jackson. I welcome Nikki Jackson for a public input and deputation, the Director of Alcohol Health Watch. Nikki, are you online? Can you hear me?
Kia ora, Mayor. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we're just waiting for a little volume adjustment, which will happen now. Hey, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for reaching out via email to our council. If I can ask that you can just give us a short overview first of why you are doing this today and how you've reached out to all other councils. That would be lovely, just getting everyone up to speed. And then the floor is yours for about 8 to 10 minutes, and there might be some questions. Thank you.
Kia ora, tēnā koe Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councillors. Tēnā koutou te reo pōwhiri e hare ana hou kua whaiwa o ki te tū me te kōrero. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. I had planned to be there in person, but family situations didn't mean that was possible. But I'm more than happy to come back to your wonderful region. So the reason being is in that April this year, I sent a letter to all mayors and council chief executives around the country in relation to opportunities to reduce alcohol-related harm. Because in late March, Auckland Council unanimously voted for the first time in support of a private members bill, Chloe Shawbrook's private members bill, which seeks to minimise alcohol harm from getting rid of the appeals process to local alcohol policies and ending alcohol sponsorship of sport. 2 weeks later, that was passed at Christchurch City Council through a mayor's recommendation. That was followed at Whanganui District Council. And then a couple of weeks ago at Hamilton City Council was also passed unanimously. I've now been running workshops throughout the Motu. Councils have come forward and said, come and talk to us about what we need to do to get in behind. So I'm going across the country and meeting wonderful councillors and mayors around the country, and they are very keen to take leadership on alcohol harm. So this morning, I'd like to present on the bill and to get a bit of a background for you. So then hopefully you can proceed to the next full council meeting to also vote in support of this bill and encourage your local MPs to do the same. So can I kick into it?
Yes.
Have you got the slides that I gave in advance?
Can you share your screen, Nikki?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So while you open that up, I'm just going to say to councillors, Councillor Worsnop is joining us via Zoom, so we're just removing her from the apologies. Thank you. Okay,
Oh,
Nikki, yes, we
okay.
can.
Thank you so much, Mia. Look, there's strong rationale for minimising the harm from alcohol in your region. This is at the DHB level, but Tairawhiti has the highest level of hazardous drinking across the motu, where almost half of drinkers report hazardous drinking. This is a regular consumption of alcohol that's likely to increase physical and mental health harm, much higher than the national average. Male drinkers in particular, more than half report hazardous drinking. That's higher among Māori. And there seems to be a social gradient, although there's wide confidence intervals, that male drinkers in more deprived areas are reporting higher levels of hazardous drinking. The inequities we see in alcohol use across the country are always greatest among women. So 1 in 3 female drinkers in Tairawhiti DHB are hazardous drinkers, and that's much higher amongst Wahine Māori than European women. And again, a strong social gradient by level of deprivation. In Gisborne district in particular, the graphs on the right are hard to see, but the first one is hospitalisations wholly attributable to alcohol in relation to acute intoxication. In fact, the council has a lower than national average in terms of intoxication. The second one is admissions due to chronic drinking, and again is falling down the bottom there, but a much higher rate of mortality from alcohol in the Tairawhiti DHB. And you'll be seeing other social harms and health harms in your region through violence and crime, road deaths, injuries, family harm, child maltreatment, alcohol abuse, dependence, poor mental health, suicide, dementia, 7 forms of cancer, heart disease, stroke. And you've got wonderful leaders, wahine toa in the Gisborne area, who are absolutely leading the way in relation to action on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and in particular kaupapa Māori approaches to reducing that harm. Now, there are obviously a number of structural social drivers in our environment that give rise to people, to New Zealanders drinking hazardously. The alcohol environment is one of those factors. And the 3 strongest drivers of inequities and harm are price, where alcohol is more affordable today than ever before. Advertising is prolific, it's uniquely targeted to individuals, it's highly available, either in our neighbourhoods or now from the comfort of our couch. And these 3 strong drivers of alcohol use and harm are disproportionately concentrated in our most deprived communities, exacerbating those health harms and other harms from alcohol, but further driving other inequities, social and economic inequities due to alcohol harm. And so that's why it's really important that I want to present to you this private members bill, which is the only private members bill in the biscuit tin that actually seeks to minimise the harm from alcohol and not liberalise it. So it seeks to address these 2 key drivers, availability and advertising, removing the appeals process from local alcohol policies, adding a few more criteria for district licensing committees to consider when granting licenses, and ending alcohol sponsorship of broadcast sport. We've got to go back to what these new laws in 2012 were all about. The objective was to improve community input into local alcohol licensing decisions through local alcohol policies, through local district licensing committees having more criteria to refuse a license. These regulations were set up more than 8 years ago for local alcohol policies, but only 35% of our population live in any council that hasn't adopted LAP. We're going to the Supreme Court this year on Auckland's local alcohol policy. Hamilton gave up, Wellington gave up, Christchurch gave up after spending more than $1 million of ratepayer money. These LAPs have been extensively appealed by the supermarkets, the bottle stores. And our research shows that as they've progressed through that appeals process, they've been totally watered down, so they're less effective in their protections from alcohol harm. And this is kind of actually what we see when we look at these provisional local alcohol policies as they've gone through the appeals process. I'm used to seeing track changes in these documents. And obviously the Gisborne lab had changes following the appeals process to the saturation or the density of off licenses in your areas, as well as changes to the trading hours. So local government's already made a call on this. In 2018, 95% support for amending our liquor laws to give communities greater say that the ability for appellants to endlessly challenge a community's preference regarding the sale of alcohol is untenable. You've been the recipient of these laws, and councils around the country don't have the resources to fight the industry to uphold community desires for greater control. And as we were promised that alcohol licenses would be harder to get and easier to lose, this has not been the case. And, we see the, very few licenses being refused in Gisborne. I know that there's other reasons behind that. This is the same across the motu, very few licenses being refused. Your best chance of trying to prevent a liquor license in your neighbourhood is to get the applicant to withdraw, and that's what we advise communities. So that's not reflected in that data. And when I started this job 5 years ago, my very first case as an expert witness was for the bottle store in Gladstone Road, and presenting evidence to the District Licensing Committee on why another bottle store in this high crime area was not going to serve the community. And the second part of the bill is around alcohol sport sponsorship. So, which we know through research increases harm to young people, but also to adults. It's not just about brand switching, it's about increasing positive attitudes to alcohol in general. And many of our elite teams are still sponsored by alcohol companies. Your local rugby team union still has alcohol sponsorship, but I've not seen it broadly exposed on their social media, which has been pleasing to see. But they have some alcohol sponsors within a raft of other sponsors that they get their money from. So this glorifies alcohol use in our country. The Super Rugby women's teams have made a call to not accept alcohol sponsorship. We got rid of tobacco. Endless government reports. The 20 DHBs are all asking for an end to alcohol sponsorship in sport. This is a no-brainer. We've got to get this across the line. There is really strong public support in this country for changes around alcohol. They want to see the government take stronger action. They want greater protections, especially to children, from alcohol advertising, and they don't want the industry to be involved in decisions around alcohol and policy making. So as I said, we've had 4 councils lead the way, and I'm presenting to a council almost every week for the next 5 weeks on this issue. They're now going out to get their local MPs to support the bill. They need 61 MPs from across the parties to show support for the bill so it can bypass the biscuit tin and go straight in to be debated in Parliament. And so I strongly urge you to take this to a full council meeting. You will have high levels of alcohol harm in your region, and you can make a huge difference to well-being by reducing the harm from alcohol. So that's the recommendation that all the councils are now looking to vote on. So I'll stop sharing, and I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Nikki. Yes, and we have our own committee here, which Councillor Pat Seymour chairs on our behalf, and I'm sure you have met the time when they did make a recommendation for the alcohol store in Gladstone Road, but it was overturned. So Pat, do you have a question of Dr. Jackson?
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, and we certainly share your views, and you note that there have not been many new applications in Gisborne, but it is of some frustration that one decision with respect to probably the one you referred to, the committee determined that it wasn't appropriate and declined it, and ALA overturned the committee decision, which was carefully written based on the information that we are required to consider. So it is quite frustrating when the committee tries to do the right thing, listening to the community. The other thing I'd like to say in relation to that, and you might have a suggestion of how we could make it better, because we're only ready to ask you questions, we don't have a huge participation by our public with respect to applications before the District Licensing Committee, do we, Councillor Forrihinger? Maybe you can suggest, this council advertises on its Facebook page or on our website, I beg your pardon. We don't advertise in the newspaper, but I do see when I'm away, other councils advertise applications in the newspaper. So since I'm only allowed to ask a question, do you see that that makes a greater difference or more, and encourages participation of the public?
Well, absolutely. the more mechanisms you use, the better. I think in particular in relation to your communities, it's going to require using your council networks, your community development workers, those who have connections with communities. For example, in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, the local boards are all notified of the licence applications. They then put it out through their networks. We have local boards who also object to licences. It's about using as many approaches as possible to let your communities know. We want changes in the liquor laws which require applicants to do much better in relation to consulting with their local communities and informing them of licence applications. It's really hard still across the country to find out what's going on in your neighbourhood.
And supplementary then, do you have a comment on where ALA overturns a local decision?
No, I don't. In fact, it was very sad to see. I thought the evidence was overwhelming as well. I think we need Section 105 of our liquor laws in terms of the criteria to grant a licence. Although they're an improvement from 1989 where it was get a licence, we need to see stronger regulation coming through in the review of our liquor laws, which Minister Whāpoi has announced and will occur this parliamentary term. So I encourage you to have your say up until the end of next year on our liquor laws. We want to see changes in Section 105 so it's harder to get that liquor licence. At the moment, that criteria is just, it's too high.
Thank you.
To get over. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Nikki. Councillor Wharehinga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Dr. Jackson. Great presentation. I work alongside Councillor Pat Seymour as well in regards to the whole liquor space and the organisation Kapai Kaiti that was pointed in regards to that. I'm the ex-chairman of that organisation. So,
I was the witness for them.
yes, I'm aware of that, Dr. Jackson. The community was very disappointed when that was overturned, because that was one of those rare examples where it felt like everyone was cohesive and working together. And it's on the point of cohesiveness that I actually wanted to ask you a question, which was around, to your knowledge, how many MPs currently support this bill going through? Do you have numbers on that?
So I'm aware that all 8, so it's only the 61 non-executive MPs that can sign up to a bill, so not ministers. Ministers can't sign up to these private members' bills through this system. So at the moment, it's the 8 non-ministers of the Green Party. I'm aware that 2 of Te Pāti Māori have signed up. So we need many more. We need all 38 Labour and about 10 National and 3 ACT or vice versa. We have a long way to go, but it's really important that you speak to your local MPs to ask them if they're going to put their name behind this.
Awesome, thank you. And then my second question is actually to staff. How do we bring this to our next council paper?
Yep. So we'll get to that after we've said goodbye to Dr. Jackson. Awesome. We will get to that. Thanks. Councillor Cranston, last question.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Jackson. Absolutely don't doubt the harm, but is there a definition of the hazardous drinker, and is it on a scale?
Yes, absolutely. It's the World Health Organization audit scale, alcohol use disorders identification test. And it's 10 questions in our New Zealand Health Survey that's carried out every year. It asks about how often you drink, how much do you drink, what harms you experience, and you need to score 8 or more to be classified as a hazardous drinker. It roughly equates to a heavy drinking occasion at least once a month. So that's increasing your risk of physical and mental health harm.
Yeah.
Okay. Very last question, Councillor Akuhata Brown.
Apologies, Madam Mayor. I should have put it up sooner because this is a kaupapa I'm very passionate about. I just wanted to ask Dr. Jackson, have you seen the recently kind of finished report from Te Herenga Hauora around Te Tiriti or Waitangi and alcohol law? Have you seen that paper? Yes.
Kristen presented her report to us on Monday. Oh, cool. And absolutely. So I urge you, when it comes out in the next 6 months or in the year, consultation on the review of the Act. First and foremost, we need to see Tiriti in the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act throughout the Act and in every part to really uphold our obligations around Tiriti. So absolutely, that should be your #1 recommendation in the review of the Act.
Nikki, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. As a council, we will have a discussion a little bit later. We'll talk to our CEO, see how we can have a discussion. We'll definitely take it up with Kiritapuelan and Meka Whaitiri as well. We are meeting with them soon. And thank you for the good work you do in this space. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Kia ora. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Okay, so we'll just add that to our discussion later. Yes. Okay, I also take away Councillor Robinson's apology. He's joining us on Zoom. Welcome, Tony. So Heather, if you can please just, everyone's happy, we'll just adjust that. Oh, we never had one. Oh, we will not remove the apology because it wasn't there.
Did you not get my text, Riet?
No, because I do not. Anywho. Oh, there we go. 2 minutes past 9. Too late, mate. Too late. Too late. If it's not 8:59, there's no apology.
You know that clock on the wall's wrong, right?
Okay, councillors, let us dig into our agenda. We have no extraordinary business, no notice of motion, no adjourned business. I take you to page 13 of our agenda. We will be talking about our navigational and safety bylaw review. So this is just for us to decide if we will want to do that. Councillor Seymour.
I was just going to move the paper,
Thank you.
Chair, because it's
Seconded by Councillor Burdett.
There's a number of,
Yeah.
there's the backgrounds there, the materials there. It's a recommendation that we do one, we should do one, so
Good
I'm happy
paper.
to move the recommendation.
Thank you, Charlotte, and
Thank you
everyone
very
for the good paper. All in favour, contrary, carried. Thank you for that. Okay, we move on to page 22. So Gisborne District Council draft submission on the National Adaptation Plan consultation. Thank you, Dr. Magnus, for this paper. It's been interesting to read. And I just want to get to what an extensive submission we are making. So this just goes back again to us being consulted by the government. The amount of staff hours having to analyze the documents and having to make a submission on our behalf. What an extensive, fantastic submission. Thank you for that. Joe is not here, but thank you. Please convey that to Joe as well. I'm going to open the floor for any questions or queries, but I'm very happy to move this. Thank you. Any questions or queries in regards to our submission?
No.
Just hands up and microphones.
Through you, Madam Chair, how do we know whether the government take any notice of our submission?
How long is it?
How can we? Yeah. Just, you know.
I will take that as a rhetorical question, Councillor Burdett.
Because, you know, our staff do a marvellous job. The submissions are pretty positive, but the response doesn't seem to be equally as responsive or positive.
Well, I do hope the government take notice of this extensive submission we made, well thought through, real Tairawhiti specific in there, stuff that's important to us. So we would urge the government to please, and we will keep on advocating on our behalf as well. Councillor Seymour. Oh, there we
After
go.
such a comprehensive paper.
Yes.
Page 75, item 3.7. And I'm just wondering what, we've been hot on insurance lately. Just what exactly are we saying there, please? And who's going to bear the cost?
I might pass that one to Magnus. If you would.
So Magnus, we're talking about number 3.7 on page 75 or page 5 of the report. And it's about the flood insurance availability and affordability.
And Madam Chair, can I be specific?
Yep.
I really want to ask about what are we saying about affordability? Because insurance, which most people have, is going up all the time. And are we submitting that there's going to be affordable insurance? So what are we really saying? This is our submission to government.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So that is government asking us whether we want them to ensure that insurance is affordable and available. So that's a government responsibility. So we are saying to government that they should make it affordable and available by putting the right incentives in place and regulating insurance companies so they don't charge exorbitant premiums, and so it is affordable to low-income earners. So it's about putting the right incentives in place and making sure that we have competition amongst insurance companies. So we have it being available and affordable.
Can we just explore that a little more?
Yep.
So to what degree are we thinking, or is it not necessary for us to be more explicit through you, Madam Chair? Because there is competition in the insurance industry now. Insurance is getting more and more expensive. I mean, it is hugely expensive, even individually for one homeowner. So if you pursue those words literally, are we saying the government is going to provide insurance? We just need to be clear about what we're submitting on, I think.
So is that not what we intend with 3.7?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we don't intend governments to be taking care of insurance or floating an insurance company, because like we said in the submission, we will have jurisdictions that have tried that and it's been futile or counterproductive. So we are saying government should take a regulatory approach to ensure that we have insurance being available. So create incentives for insurance companies. And it is not a standalone policy. So it's a mix of different policies. Insurance premiums are getting higher, and especially in high risk, we have properties in high risk locations. So we are saying government should use insurance to incentivize people. So you could have a system whereby, in other paragraphs in the submission, whereby we'll have regulatory approaches and even cancel using consenting processes to disincentivize people building assets and infrastructure in such high risk locations. But people who have assets in low-risk locations can be encouraged, or they can have access to insurance with lower premiums. So it's a mix of different policies playing out here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Just an observation. Insurance is very, very expensive. We all know that. And unless you determine what you actually specifically want covered, in general terms, it won't be covered. And I quote from personal experience, culverts and bridges that were blown out in the last 2 floods. I mean blown out, mess. About 60 grand to fix, so I've been quoted. Got onto the insurance, said, you know, have a look at this, send someone to have a look at it. Well, you're not covered. And told that if you didn't specifically have it in your policy, forget it.
So our submission is specifically highlighting to the government what a massive issue it is, especially in an area like ours, where affordability is a big issue and natural hazard is a massive issue for us. So double whammy. Any other questions? If not, I will put this. Thank you so much for this submission. Nadine, please thank Joe on our behalf as well. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour, contrary, carried. Thank you for that, Charlotte. Okay, we move to our next paper, which is also in regards to climate change, and very interesting read, making it easy to read the report with the lovely pictures. It's always good when we have a report and there's not only words, there's also very interesting diagrams. Thank you for that. So I will open up the floor for our report on our climate change update. It is a noting report. So councillors, any questions in regards to our emission budgets? It's a very good update just to keep us where we are going and also what we are doing. Councillor Akuata-Brown.
Kia ora, thank you again, staff, for all the work in these spaces. I just, in talking with colleagues across the nation, one of the things we're really aware of the amount of plans that staff create, reports, etc. And just wanting to kind of ask the impetus of putting those plans into action, how urgent, you know, where do they sit in a space of the doing framework, and what holds that up? Because, you know, there's lots of talk around the urgency, managed retreats and climate change's impact on coastal specifics, our place. But I was just wondering, how do we see the plans moving forward into actions and in an urgency?
Very Your Worship. So in terms of the plans, that was a decision that was made by council to have a plan in place. That plan, the action plan, will come back in November. That will outline what it's going to cost to achieve, I think we said, carbon zero by net zero emissions by 2030 instead of 2040, which was the staff recommendation. So there's some underpinning science that needs to happen. So first, there's currently some risk assessment work that's being undertaken. There's some work being done so Tonkin Taylor's doing some of that work. So we need to understand the science and the impacts better. We need to bring the community along with this, with us in terms of that journey. There's some massive disruptive changes that will happen to the way that we live. So it's not something that can just happen overnight in terms of action and implementation. Otherwise, we'll all be driving around in EV vehicles, but we're not. And the other part about that is that we actually need some funding at significant cost to be able to transition there.
Thank you for that, Madam C. I guess I'm just following up these conversations with these questions to my council. And so the principles of a just transition to be embedded in all actions is one of the constructs of talks, and intergenerational equity of debt funding public adaptation works to be considered. And of course, iwi Māori's role in this space too. So I just had to put those forward. I'd make notes. But thank you again for the mahi. And yeah, I know it's not easy in respect to all things that are considered in the space, but we did move it ahead a decade. So that's better than nothing. So kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Cranston, thank you.
Yeah, it goes into many areas, climate change. I think what we can do, and that's what we do need to keep momentum on and not lose any traction on, is our curbside strategy and waste separation. So we definitely have to have a focus of that and keeping that going as fast as possible.
Tony.
Just on that point, when was that report on the curbside hopefully going to come back to us prior to the election? Because I think we noted it was going to be after the election when it was last before us.
Yes, it will be probably tied in with the November timeframes. Dave Wilson, are you online?
Through Your Worship, we're still working through the procurement of that and the plan for it, but it'd be very unlikely if we'll be able to make it before October with a meaningful decision by that stage.
Thank you. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor Akuata-Brown. When I read the report, I was really heartened between points number 30 and points number 42. And I tie back to what we discussed last week with declaring a climate change emergency, which we haven't done up to this stage. But what I'm happy to see is the 12 action points in there where we first talk about our risk assessments, which we are doing. Then we're planning for equitable transition planning. We have a climate change roadmap project, and then also our organizational emission reduction plan. So I'm proud to say that we have 4 big programs where we are addressing climate change head on. So I do want to thank our staff for these work happening with some of our partners. I see Trust Tairawhiti is in there as well. And obviously our CCO would be in there as well. But yes, we're moving in the right direction with pace. If I have no more questions, I've got a mover in Councillor Pat Seymour, seconder Councillor Akuata-Brown, all in favour, contrary carried. Okay, councillors. This is Charlotte, Tim, who's doing Nadine, that's just one, thank you. So this is a big piece of work yesterday that we also discussed with Local Government New Zealand, the immense pressure that are on local authorities by all the reforms happening. And thank you, Nadine, for you and your staff pulling all of this together for us.
Thank you. And very much a team effort. So, and you had yes, Her Worship said, the discussion with our GNZ president yesterday in terms of the impact. So I'll just run through them again, just as a high level reminder of what we're facing. But the purpose really is to highlight the impact of the reforms in terms of this council, our council, and how we are approaching the changes, and also to seek some guidance as to what you would like to see us doing more of, or how we can grip up in terms of really advocating for some of the strategic issues and challenges in the region to ensure that we get the best out of the reforms. So, and this is just a summary in terms of what you've got in front of you, but really the picture is there's a lot going on. It's unclear as to what the shape and form local government will look like once everything's landed. The approach that's clear though is that there's more move, and this was discussed again yesterday, in terms of the centralisation of service delivery, independent governance, and also increased national consistency as the solutions. And in terms of the increased national consistency, I think it's fair, and you would see them in the submissions that have been made. Councils have been asking for national direction for a very long time, and now we've got it. It's just not quite potentially in the form that would have liked it. So let's just go to the operating environment. So these are the different streams that are underway. So the RM reform, which I'll touch a bit more on later. Three Waters, which are well across, Future for Local Government, which we've had the meeting with Jim Harmer and co. Climate change, which you're seeing in terms of the agenda, Māori rights and interests, emergency management, and national direction in terms of biodiversity, freshwater, urban development, etc. Pretty much as a unitary touches every single activity. So just a reminder in terms of the Three Waters reform, so it's a government-driven initiative, and we're all clear on that in terms of it not being council, but our focus should be on ensuring that we get the best outcomes for our Tairawhiti community. Government is intent that the reforms will be largely irreversible by 2023 elections. These water entities, of which there'll be 4, will be stood up in 2024. So I think we've got, let's see, yeah, the new chief executives, as you would have heard yesterday, that they're recruiting at the moment for that.
The 4 CEOs.
The 4 CEOs. I think we've threshed out Three Waters.
Sorry, I guess just on Three Waters, I'm sorry I missed yesterday's meeting to speak with our GNZ. Was just simply to ask, we have been given significant email as councillors in recent days from concerned ratepayers. Would we be, would it be in our best interest to push for a referendum or any of that in respect to our role in localism as such? I just was going to ask Stuart, I think yesterday, but of course I wasn't here. So
we discussed that yesterday, Councillor Akuata-Brown, and the constant theme from all mayors is that we should not forget this is a government process, not a council process. So for us, we did ask our community way back, just through informal consultation, what they thought of it. So we know that I think it was 87% of people that responded was uncomfortable with the reforms in its current shape and form. So that clear message was sent to the government. But so it's a government process. So if the government want to go out and then consult, it is up to them. I think most regions have done a little bit because also we are the ones that the reform is done to. We are not the ones doing it. So we're on the receiving end and we're pushing back as much as we can. And like our CEO said, the government is planning to push this through. So what we are trying to do is make sure we get the best possible deal for Tairawhiti. So to answer that at this stage, it's a government process. We are doing the best we can to push back, but those emails, we will probably still be receiving quite a few more, but I don't think it is up to us to make that call. It is a government process, so if they want to do a referendum, they will do a referendum on that. Because we did an informal questionnaire already.
We did discuss that yesterday. I just want to make an observation again, and it's one you've heard me make before, but this is the paper, the Three Waters reform. The previous PowerPoint said we want what's in the best interest of our community should be front and centre. And I just want to say again publicly that the issue around regulated supplies of everywhere that provides for more than one homeowner, of a pack house to one or two sheds, from one or two sheds, from a farm wool shed to 2 or 3 cottages, is not in Marae in our communities. That is not in the best interests of our community, that they all become a regulated water supply. And we did hear yesterday from the chairman of LGNZ that there are many, many more of those supplies than they recognised when they first set down that piece of road. But there has been a recent paper out where the decision says those will not, private supplies will not become part of the council supply, but they will still be regulated. And I think we have to continue to say that it's going to put a huge cost either on the regulator, and then ultimately that will feed back to the homeowner. And I mean, none of those supplies are anywhere where anyone would have a family at risk, because we don't want that. I mean, where we have 1 or 2 houses, or 1 or 2, a pack house serving 1 or 2 houses, of course the owner of that supply is in the best interest of seeing that they have safe, clean water for their families, if that's who accesses it. So it's just an absolute indication that government didn't understand what they were doing, and to force regulation and then monitoring, I mean, it's just digging up a bureaucracy that is completely unnecessary. So I think we have to keep pushing back on that.
And we will, and I just want to pull us back to it's about we're not going to debate, and I know we started it with, we're not going to debate what is happening or what not. I think Nadine's is more an update on the reforms, and we will have more time to really dig into it after her review update. I do have a question from Councillor Worsnop, just mindful of what I just said. We're not going to debate Three Waters now or debate the RMA. We're more talking about the overall process of us being in reform.
But can I just say, Madam Chair, before you go to Councillor Worsnop to finish the thing I was speaking, it is actually on the previous slide that said it needs to be in the best interest of our community, should be front and centre. So that's what I'm responding.
Yep, no, I'm not debating. Yeah, all good. I'm just saying let's stick to Nadine's presentation. Councillor Worsnop.
Hey, thank you. So my point is just really around, in light of all that we're reading about in this report, is there an opportunity to formalise a schedule of meetings with our MP? I know we've had numerous attempts. I know I've talked about it in emails recently. I think that Kitty and Mecca should be meeting with us at least quarterly. They genuinely, I think broadly speaking, the government on lots of fronts genuinely seem to believe that most of the resistance to different parts of the reforms are in large part political gamesmanship by local councils. And that's, you know, by and large, that's not borne out. You know, actually there are practical and pragmatic things that we need to be able to highlight to them so that they understand that when there's resistance, it's because we need them to change something rather than because we just want to, you know, beat down the government's door. And I think doing that face-to-face is a much better option if we can establish something formal. Is that an option? Is that something councils do?
Yes, and we've done that several times before. They do set agendas with us a year in advance. It does get cancelled every now and then, but they do catch up with us regularly. And during COVID, that was definitely minimized, and we did have the odd Zoom meeting, but absolutely our MPs are open to meeting to us, and we have met with them in different capacities, all of us on different levels, face to face. I personally have had several catch-ups with them, sharing our concerns, and they are keen to talk to all of us. and my office are looking into possible dates. But yes, no, we meet once a term.
So I guess my point is that most of it seems to be ad hoc and responsive, as opposed to like just if you meet quarterly and you meet, for example, might be after a sustainable Tairawhiti meeting or something, they will schedule it and they won't get cancelled.
Yep. Thank you for that. We will definitely take that up. We've taken note, and Donna will follow that up as well. Nadine, okay, so now we're going to go back to and then we'll ask questions at the end.
Yes, okay,
Thank
that
you.
might help.
Because let's not lose focus of why we are here.
I was going to get there at the end, Councillor Woolsnott, because the issues are great and we need a focused session with ministers in terms of the impact on unitary authority. So as we carry through, we'll go on to the, I just wanted to also say in terms of the Three Waters reform, that our key focus is so ensuring that we can get the best outcomes for Tairawhiti through the process, but our focus is on ensuring that our staff are supported in terms of that transition, and anyone that's run an organisation knows that it's not just a matter of lifting and shifting and moving people to another entity. There is a whole lot of cultural considerations that need to occur. You need to know what you're actually going into, the practicalities around what that all looks like on the ground. So, and as we all know, when that's not in place, that impacts on service delivery. Resource management reform. So this is a biggie. And so while everyone's been focused on Three Waters and the assets, the impact of the RMA or the resource management reforms could significantly reshape will reshape the form, potentially function of local government. So this came out of the Randerson review, which looked at the RMA, basically said it's no longer fit for purpose, and had several issues that were identified, which was around the natural environment, pressures on the natural environment, climate change and how we're going to be able to reduce carbon emissions and adapt to climate change, but also our urban areas we're catering for population growth and our housing issues, etc., etc. And also further to that was around the need to enable Māori, iwi Māori, to be able to effectively participate in that system. So the proposal was to repeal the RMA 1991 Act and introduce 3 new statutes, which is the Natural Built Environment Acts, which people refer to as the NBA, and the Strategic Planning Act, which is now going to be, I understand, the Spatial Planning Act. Those are going to be introduced to the House in the third quarter of the year. And just for your information, so the NBA is around the quality of the environment, and it introduces the concept of te mana o te taiao, which is kind of the natural resources, water, the soil, as well as you've got te mana o te wai in there. And it provides in terms of we've already got a combined district regional plan, but for other areas it will combine their plans. So it will be quite a change to the way other regions are operating. The Spatial Planning Act is around integrated land use planning. So we have a spatial plan, we'd have to do some more work around that. We are one of the regions, I think there are 14 regions that have been identified to have spatial planning, spatial plans for their region in place. The big change here, as we discussed slightly yesterday, was that there will be, I understand through the Spatial Planning Act, they're going to be introducing this concept around joint committees. So a joint committee would be made up of mana whenua representatives and representatives with, we hope, that are elected members, because initially it was, if you go to the Randerson review, it's about expert panelists that will be put together, which would mean that may not be elected members. But one of the key points that has been pushed is that in order to have accountability back to the community, you do need some form of mandated representation around the table. The joint committees are meant to be separate from regional councils and TLAs. They are considering what that secretariat might look like, whether it's a regional council hosts the secretariat. So secretariat just as in how we manage hearings, support and provide you advice. If they go for an independent secretariat, that essentially means that for unitary, we will be lifting some of our planning staff out and into an independent, whatever that looks like. So I think we've had some discussions with MFE around the significance of that impact, especially when they're looking at the unitary as the way to kind of operate into the future. You'd be slicing it up in many different ways, and it will not be cost efficient nor effective for the purposes of our community. So there's certainly a conversation that we need to have with the ministers with that regard. The other big part of this is about compliance monitoring and enforcement hubs, which we again touched on yesterday. We don't know in the Randerson review whether that part will be picked up, but again, as discussed, that is the holy grail for, or the blueprint for how all the RMA reforms are going to shake out. So there's some key dates up there. The emergency management reform, which is otherwise known as the trifecta program, that has been delayed. So Minister Allen has delayed that to introduce that bill after the local body elections. In terms of the magnitude of changes, I think this is probably the more positive reform that's happening in terms of enabling Māori participation. We've seen that through all the kind of natural disasters that have happened and the partnership approach that applies there and mobilising the community. So that's a key tenet of the changes in the emergency management bill. So including representation to the group committees, and we already semi-operate like that in Tairawhiti. We just haven't had that formalised through legislation. And then future for local government, and that's kind of running behind everything. And so they will hope to have a final report and recommendations in 2023, but it's all going to depend on where the RM reforms land. And if they land before that, that actually makes this piece of work redundant. And then we've got the climate change response package. So the managed retreat climate change adaptation weren't included in the RMA because they are outside the scope of the RMA, but there's a whole heap of work, as you've seen, and as we've been submitting on, that are in that space. And then, as I've mentioned, the key tenet running through this is Te Tiriti partnerships and outcomes. So the legislation, or the reports behind the draft legislation are pointing towards various acts giving effect to Te Tiriti. And so the interesting part is working out, well, what entities or who is giving effect to the Tiriti, and a lot of the conversation is around local government still. So there's a talk about there's some form of local government that will exist that will give effects, but we just don't know what it's going to look like. And so there are variations. And this is just an overview in terms of what's happening by way of amalgamation and changes, but also existing boundaries. So you've got your regional councils, I think there's 16 of them. Then you've got your 4, I'll show another page, with the 4 water entities that cut across regional boundaries, which create issues for compliance, monitoring and enforcement. Then you have things like Te Pukenga, which knows no boundaries. You have the DHB reforms, which now has one. It's all being sliced in very different ways, and then we overlay that. So simplification, almost some kind of creating a bit more complexity in the way that we work. And that's clearly been the voice from the sector, as we just can't see how these things are all integrating. And then the drivers, so I've mentioned before, centralisation, improved financial sustainability, independent government, joined up national direction and stronger treaty partnership. So how do we influence this? And that's going back to the question that, or the request from Councillor Worsnop. I think that we do need to have a meeting with the ministers to talk about the implications for Tairawhiti. And this is not about, and we need to be clever about how you do it, because it isn't about criticising all the pieces of legislation that are coming out. It's about really painting the picture of Tairawhiti and the issues that may arise depending on how some of the reforms may land, but also providing an alternative solution to the challenges that we are facing. And in doing so, the guiding principles being it's about our people and what's best for the outcomes, working with our Māori partners. And we've already had some of that discussion around how if we had, we want that co-governance relationship. So it'll be quite stronger maybe in a joint committee here than it might be in other spaces, because they're not saying 50-50 in the joint committees in other regions, whereas we, in that discussion that was had, I take that. Delivering on our strat priorities and looking for other collaborative opportunities. We're also using, as you would have seen in the submission that Dr. Magnus and the team, Charlotte and Joe, put together, that we're using those as opportunities to request funding to look at some really big issues that aren't necessarily the same as what you might experience in Bulla with the Department of Internal Affairs investing in case studies there. We've also put our hand up to be a pilot study for the new spatial plans and MBAs that will come out, so that we can work with to try and inform and improve outcomes. So hopefully we will be one of the pilot tests for there. So that, along with what the Mayor was saying in terms of advocating at every opportunity we get, but I do think there is that next step in terms of being able to present a coherent picture of the impacts on a unitary authority, but also the opportunities that unitary authorities have and how we might be able to improve things going forward in terms of the legislation would be a good thing to do with the ministers. So just some next steps. And you would have had a nice little handout just to demonstrate, to show the amount of work that the teams, because it goes across the organisation. No, that's in your appendix.
Thank you for that, Nadine. And thank you for the paper. Councillor Seymour.
Another question with respect to some of the items that government think that they're going to achieve, and one of those, again from your heading, and I think it is something we need to debate with the ministers: improved performance by independent governance. I mean, seriously, what does that look like for a unitary authority, for the relationship that we have with our iwi leaders and our various members of the community? What are actually they setting out to achieve, and how extensive do they see independent governance? What actually are they asking of the reforms? Do we know? Well, I think we should be asking the ministers that, because it's jargon unless somebody can put the words behind it.
Yeah. I think it's fair that, so with the Three Waters reform that was tracking on its own, I don't think, unless there was another agenda that no one was aware of, but it's clear that there's some catch up across central government in terms of how these all knit together. And I don't think that the implications of what was initially being proposed were really well thought out or mapped out. And that's why we always hear that the future for local government should have been the work that had been done first. But on the other hand, the other view is that local government would never have changed if they didn't have something as big as Three Waters to move people in that direction. That's, yeah, but I really don't know that. I mean, that's a really good question for ministers around. What does that look like? What
are they actually seeking to achieve? And because while they, and I think Stuart Crosby outlined it really clearly yesterday, that they initially said it was optional, and then quite soon after councillors embarked on the process and were clear that many councils were not happy with it, then suddenly it became mandatory. So there wasn't a clear understanding of what they were embarking on or what the government was asking everyone else to embark on at the point at which the process began.
I have Councillor Wharehenga and then Councillor Akuhata-Brown. Thank you, Councillor Seymour.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you for that presentation, Nadine, and thank you, staff, for the paper. I mean, I am very reluctant to go down the rabbit hole of kind of, you know, expressing my frustration in regards to all of this stuff. So instead, I'll turn that on its head and really want to acknowledge the amount of work that the staff are doing, because there's a lot here. There's so much here. You asked for councillor direction in regards to stuff moving forward. I am really keen on us being a pilot, and I endorse us putting our hand up to be a pilot for the RMA reforms, for the MBA stuff, the Spatial Planning Act, etc., etc. One of the things that I've noticed as a councillor in my time over my terms and my time as being a councillor, there has been decisions and things put into RMA and things put into different decisions that are centrally located that don't actually suit us in Te Tairawhiti. And I think this is a really great way for us to be able to engage before all of those things are set, in order to be able to really firmly, I guess, embed some East Coastness, some Tairawhiti into what may be coming. So I'm really keen for us to be part of that pilot. In regards to the Three Waters stuff, I just endorse our pragmatic approach that we've been taking at the moment. I mean, our community has said it, and we've said it so many times around this table that actually, you know, we don't want this, but it's like the Mayor has said earlier today, this is something that's happening to us, you know, and we can either passively let it happen or pragmatically engage, and I endorse us pragmatically engaging. One thing that I would really like to table in regards to, we talk about partnership and co-governance with iwi Māori under Te Tiriti. And I don't know if this is the intent behind the wording that's coming out of central government, but for me reading it, it reads like that they're wanting partnership, but the models by what they're wanting partnership are actually the colonial models of kind of nomination and expectation and things like that. One thing, like for instance, just to give an example, around the emergency management reform, there's talks of iwi representatives to CEDM group, etc., etc. But I mean, functionally, as Māori, we have things like Māori wardens, which have their governance group, which already kind of engage in a space like that. You know, I feel like that's a much more pragmatic or kaupapa Māori centrally located kind of way of being able to engage in that CEDM emergency management reform. But I also think the same way about the partnership stuff wider than just this. This is just a singular example. So it'd be great if we're able to feed in that respect. That was my only kind of detailed input. The other stuff was just around pragmatic approach for Three Waters, and keen on us being part of the pilot for the NBA. Thank you very much.
Councillor Akuhata-Brown.
Kia ora. It's kind of interesting sitting here in my third term in this space and understanding, you know, complex challenges ahead of us as a nation, let alone our region as a community. And there's often, I find, with regard to reforms, there's a bit of, well, conflicting kind of regard. Local government New Zealand went on a strong position of localism. A whole project, a whole consideration to the benefits of those of us who sit around these local governance tables, who have our ear and eye, you know, set in our regions. And there's this paternalistic notion that the government is now going to fix everything for us, and it's going to, you know, we can go to them for all things. Yet where I wrote down, where has centralisation worked the best in respect to us as citizen taxpayers, ratepayers and regions? We know that those of us who stand and to be elected in our regions, we do it because we want to influence change for our place. You know, we're totally in this for our people in our regions because we know them. We live here, etc. So there's this constant in and out of, and I get you, and I totally endorse you as our CEO trying to work out the clarity. What are they wanting in this space? What is it actually that we're trying to achieve? Because there's definitely a centralisation framework for the nation, and water is a nation issue in respect to having good drinking water, obviously making sure wastewater is treated well enough to not pollute, and also stormwater collected, made and used more so. So I see centralisation has its placement, but I'm just so pro-local that it frustrates me to constantly hear that we have things done to us by this government. So, and I know ratepayers are angry, are frustrated as well. And so I'm trying to figure out if we put together a solution space of pushing back to a government that continues to contradict almost partnership relationship when it does stuff to us, at us, not with us. And so I'm sitting here today, having read lots of reports talking about co-governance and all these new world orders of how we govern our regions and spaces, and it's got a headache because it's not clear. It is very cloudy, and it's again taking away that distinct beautiful thing of local governments that we all stand for, because we want to see our place have the best. You know, we do that for our place. We're close to our citizens and our communities. We drive the roads. We eat the produce. We share life, live and play in this region. So I guess what am I trying to say to you today is that influencing change, I think there's part of me that just sees this as a fight for democracy at a local level, very much so. And as councillors, it's obviously part of our role. And when they talk about experts, are we then saying to this electors this term, to those being in the election space, get your RMA on? Should we be then looking at people in these spaces having PhDs and masters in resource management, so that you've got that governance expertise, because that's one of the changing, kind of natures of the space, the skill bases around governance tables. So we are seeing the reform. I'm intrigued to know what they're going to find for the local government reform in that report, of course, but I just feel like we're fighting something that we're not sure what the fight is. It's a little bit, it's not transparent by any means, but yeah, so I just would love to know this is that local government New Zealand's localism reports and push. They gave 10 strong points why localism is a key and why we should fight for it, or are we just going to continually have like central government say this, change their mind, do this, that, and we just quietly go, oh, that happened. So that's my frustration today, but I appreciate your overhaul of all these reforms, and I do want to commend staff who are sitting in these spaces too. It isn't easy.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory, and then Councillor Foster.
Kia ora, thank you. I was wondering, have we worked out, or do you take account of the GDC people resources used to facilitate these reforms that most people don't want? And does the council have a mandate to use rates to pay for these reforms?
We're very conscious through the chair. We're very conscious of the amount of time that has been spent in the information requests from central government, particularly around the three waters, the working parties that have been set up for those, and the reforms. If we didn't participate in that, then Tairawhiti, in a sense, would not have a voice around the table. So we have a wider strategic lens, and that's been set through our LTP through collaboration. That gives us my opinion, to be able to participate in that, to ensure that the best outcomes, or that there is a voice around the table, because it's certainly when you've got, and if I just reflect on Three Waters, there's 22 entities in 3 waters, so 22 different voices. And we have certainly different challenges in that mix to other places. Probably Wairoa might be, you know, as our cousins across the way. But if you're not there as unitary, it will just happen to us.
Councillor Foster, thank you. And then Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Sheldrake, thank you.
Yeah, just a quick from yesterday's conversation with Stuart Crosby, his comments about, you know, councils all around the country are focused on their 10-year plans and 30-year visions, spatial plans, and government is a focus of 4 years. They're in government for 4 years. That's their only guarantee they've got, and they'll get rolled over. 3 years. Sorry, yeah, 3 years. Sorry, yeah. They're looking at 4 years to extend it. And for councils, yeah. So you know, it's really frustrating that we get these mandates and it's all rushed. Has to be rushed through because already we're seeing the population of New Zealand really not getting behind the reforms and the government's initiative at the moment, because the polls are starting to change rapidly, and one would think that you know, there's going to be changes in 2024, and they're trying to get all this stuff through urgently, so it's so entrenched that it can't be reversed. So we're the puppets. We're the puppets having to do all that, or council staff are, and the amount of money that's being wasted in the process is just incredible. So yeah, I really feel for staff and the way things are going and this and all the reforms. We've just got to go with it, and yeah, I really commend staff for their patience and for where they're going. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Sheldrake, thank you.
I guess to a degree, I take a different view from, say, that expressed by Councillor Foster just now and Councillor Akata-Brown. When I look at these proposed reforms and their bold headings, all of these reforms are significantly overdue and have been ignored by, as Stuart said yesterday, governments of both colours for decades. This government, with the full right to rule on its own, has, I think, been really aspirational. And unfortunately, with aspirations and short timeframes does come false starts. But when you step back and look at what it's trying to achieve, these things should have been done years ago. The RMA reforms should have been done years ago. Heck, the fact that we're going to have Māori wards now, when the ability to have it has existed for almost 20 years, well, it has 20 years, and it's taken that long to get to this stage, I think is indicative of how slow our society changes, and local government has never been that fast at instigating change that on some key factors. And I took Shannon's question yesterday to Stuart around why hadn't some of these changes been made sooner, to reflect maybe a question on the culture of local government. I don't want us to be fighting these reforms. I want us to embrace them. And I think our staff, for example, 3 Waters, have done an incredible job. That presentation we made to Minister Whaitiri last year, the mahi that was put into that was such a great ground base for us to move forward and advocate, knowing our region's needs, knowing our region's specifics. We're in a really great place to move forward and have a sensible discussion, not just go wah wah and yell into the wind. So the thing for me, though, is that we continually feed back positively to the government that in a small council like ours, there is a significant cost to implementing these reforms that we cannot bear on our own, and that we need those financial assistance. And we got it. We got however many million we got towards the 3 Waters reform. And we just need to keep those channels alive and active and positive. I don't see it as us fighting them. I see it as us taking the opportunity to facilitate some really good positive change for our community and the motu in a broader sense. It's hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to instigate change at any time, let alone in a very short time frame. But that's my view. And I think our staff are really amazing at what they achieve. And the only thing we need to do is keep reminding the government that, look, we're doing the best we can, but we need Putia to help us do that, and resourcing other than Putia.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sheldrake, thank you.
Yeah,
and then Councillor Burdett.
Thank you. I also reflected on yesterday's conversation with Stuart, and I was a bit surprised at some of our questioning actually of him. But and I know we're here as governance in the governance role, but I'd like to ask the CEO, what's the feeling for the staff doing the job, doing the mahi for us across the waters, who are going to be affected ultimately if this drives through? I mean, what sort of, are they in a good headspace, or is it must be pretty unsettling?
I mean, I might defer that to Dave, who's closer to the team, but there's certainly a view of things that need to change, but also it's change and people take it differently. But Dave, you can probably in a better position to comment on that.
Through your worship, there's a number of different reactions from the staff. So there's a lot of trepidation as to what's happening. Wanting a bit of certainty going forward is probably the big thing for most of the staff. Just understanding what is all this work that we've been doing and what it's going to amount to. So I think for a lot of staff, we're wanting to, the teams are looking for some answers now around what are the real time frames, what does it mean? Do we work out at Awaroa? Do we work somewhere else? Do we get different SWAT cards? Do we get new uniforms? Those are the sort of questions the staff are starting to look at now at a practical level, but also some staff are looking at opportunities as well. So what does this mean for our careers? What does this mean for what are the different opportunities for different roles or functions as well? So it's a real mixed bag between the staff, and some are really nervous. Some are worried about what the next steps are, but really just wanting to see what the next things are that come out of DIA.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Just a little supplementary, sort of roughly how many people does this affect, today? Numbers, roughly.
So directly, there's about 29, or close to 30. Indirectly, it will impact on other support services, potentially in our science area, what that might look like, how we might negotiate with the entity going forward.
Thank you.
Councillor Burdett, and then I am going to put this paper, it's a noting paper. Microphone, please.
The CEO must be perplexed with all the stuff that's coming up at us from Wellington.
Yeah.
She's the one that, in a sense, gives us a direction, gives us the right advice. It's a bit mind-blowing because in all the time I've been in council, we've never had this level of change. And for some of us, change is not easy to accept, especially when the rationale behind the change is a bit fuzzy. But in terms of this council, my own view is what we can control in the best interests of our district, we should do without question. What we can't control, we can't do much about that. Most of these changes will eventually happen. That's the thing that gets up my nose, because in some cases there's some justification. In most cases, there's none. So from that perspective, I sit here and I think, Nadine, and I think David, and I think of the staff, it's on their necks, on their shoulders to work through this stuff. Anyway, that's about as much as I mean, I just think for us as councillors, and no more wah-wah, as councillors, we have to support our chief executive. I'm sure the mayor does, because there's some tough times ahead in terms of decision making for us as a council. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Moved by Councillor Akwata Brown, seconded by Quick Smart.
Just a quick comment with respect to comments made by Councillor Robinson. There have been numerous attempts to make changes to the RMA by previous governments over probably 10 or 12 years, but the coalition and government couldn't actually get their changes through. So while, I mean, this is only happening because there is a mandate that the current government had, but it's not for want of trying that changes haven't been made in the past.
And you're seconding the page?
Yes,
Okay.
happy to.
Thank you. So one thing I wanted to say today to our staff, now that all of this has been pulled together, we are doing this amount of work on top of business as usual. So our staff are churning out huge amounts of work, and for us as governors, it is to support our staff, support our CEO, to prioritize properly, because we cannot do everything on top of business as usual. We need to make sure our resources are spent in a way which is best for our region, because every person that sits around this table wants the best for Tairawhiti. We are all cautious because a lot of change is being proposed, but our job as governors is to make sure we do get the best deal for Tairawhiti out of this. And how we can do this is by making sure we are 100% behind our staff and what they do. So I do want to acknowledge, Nadine, I know your staff are going above and beyond. And this is not going to slow down. The next term is going to be an intense term for everyone. And I talk about a political term. So I'm urging councillors, we need to get behind, but still be the active advocates for our region through our individual work where we go in our community, make sure we share the right information with our communities as well. And when we do bump into ministers, or we do get the opportunity to advocate on behalf of Tairawhiti, please make sure we bring that, the concerns and the aspirations and the visions of what we want for our region. And then last but not least, change. Everyone is afraid of change. I'm afraid of change. Everyone else is afraid of change. But as we go through this period, we do need to also look at the opportunities that can come out of this. And the review for local government, what our CEO said earlier, if we do not sit around the table, stuff will be done to us. And if we are there to negotiate on behalf of our region and make sure our voices are heard, we can then make sure we also play a part there. And our CEO and through the regionals, so we've been through the regional sector as well as through Entity C, our CEO has pushed really hard for us to maybe be a pilot for some of the RMA work, which would be fantastic, because that means we are right there at the coalface talking about how it could work for unitary councils, what works, what doesn't work. So there are also exciting opportunities in here. So let's not only be blinded by some of the process which has been less than perfect, and hope that we can advocate on behalf of our region. Councillor Akwata-Brown, right of reply, and then I'm going to put it.
All I want to say is we do absolutely want to support the staff in our CE in the space. We understand the workload is immense. So is there a prioritisation around these reforms for our staff, focusing on the fact that there's multiple change? And I do want to push back a little on Councillor Robinson's remarks, because my fight isn't against change, because probably one of the few people around here who loves change, actually been singing "Change Gonna Come" for the last 10 years. It's mostly that in our change approach and our influencing factors, it's around our place. We live here, and our role is to be as vocal in our local as we can, because we make the decisions because we're the elected representatives of our region. So I would just like to say I'm about pushing back to centralisation and government's construct to be, again, that paternalistic notion of they've got this, when they don't. They don't live here. They don't see the day-to-day struggles of a large portion of our population. And so I think it's really important that as we stand as electeds that are influencing change, that we understand what the change is. And that's why I was saying the clarity in these spaces has been a little cloudy. And I think we need to, as Councillor Worsnop noted, have those MPs come sit with us and actually give us a sense of what that clarity we need. So we can be driving in the right direction. I will obviously endorse change around these reforms. They have been a long time coming, but it's not just about change for the sake of change. It's about what's right, what's good, and what's hopeful for all of us. So for me as a councillor sitting here today, I really am excited about some of the implemented changes, reforms in place, but I'm still cautious because the clarity still seems to be a little unclear from our central government partners. So thank you for your kōrero, Madam Mayor, because we're all here for our place.
Thank you. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Let's take a nice little 15-minute break. We'll be back 20 to 11. Thank you. Tim, are you going to join us in the hot seat? Thank you for your analysis of this BERL paper. Another glowing compliment to our staff, who one of the few councils who completed BAU and the PGF on top of that. So kudos. Do you want to have, yes, Nadine, and then we'll open for some questions or queries.
If I may, just in terms of the work, we decided at the end of, or towards the end of last year, in terms of commissioning BERL to do this work, to really look at the economic impacts that the collective capital spend and also the PGF funding had on the region. We were particularly interested in how it impacted on our work overall in terms of the approach that we took, and you'll see that come through in the report. But overall, a very positive initiative that had impact in the region in terms of our economy, and the challenge going forward will be able to sustain it. But I think it is a really good document in terms of demonstrating the benefit that regional investment has from central government. Tim, is there anything else I'd like to?
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, look, it's very clear from the report that there is a significant positive impact not only on our economy but also on the capacity of our building the capacity of our people. The one thing I would say is that the scope of the work and its conclusions focused on the benefits, which are obviously significant, but there's not a lot in terms of recommendations or guidance for a way forward. So I think there's definitely a role for sort of ongoing regional leadership discussions with central government on how we can sustain some of the benefits that have come out of this PGF funding. So, and I think in particular, there's an opportunity to look at a focus on high wealth creation opportunities that might be able to help diversify the economy beyond above and beyond a primary industry focus, because it seems quite clear that government support has been able to de-risk investment sufficiently to bring about some growth and some new areas that otherwise wouldn't have been able to start up without that input. So I think there's an ongoing role there, perhaps whether it's through the Rotipura or certainly in discussion with Trust Tairawhiti around how the district can look to leverage these gains and have continued support from central government. So if there's any questions, may be able to answer, but also can certainly take away any questions you have and try and come back.
Councillor Worsnop.
Yeah, thank you. My question was, sorry, excuse me. My question was really, this is obviously quite a high level report, and it doesn't speak too much to the underlying things that contribute to those high level figures in terms of GDP, etc. I just note that a reasonably large proportion of the PGF spend was directed at the wood and forestry sector, and yet for the purposes of this report, and also, sorry, probably that largely has tied in with the fact that there has been pretty substantial growth in terms of the harvesting coming on stream, but there's not any focus really on the forest sector in this report. It's not even mentioned in those top 10 industries, and yet we know that a big chunk of growth has come from that sector. We also know a lot of money was directed from the PGF towards that area. And I just wondered if there was information, perhaps below this report level, that articulates something like how many tonnes of logs got to port that might not have been able to, you know, that sort of information that makes it a bit more real to, I guess, policymakers, but also the community who have funded the PGF via their taxes.
Thank you, Councillor Worsnop. Nadine.
Through the chair, so through your worship, the underpinning information, and I should have mentioned at the beginning that in 2021 we provided the council with the final report of the redeployment program. So that actually looked at the number of jobs that were created, the 236 jobs, the amount of, among other things, firewood that was delivered, training courses, etc. So that does that kind of goes below the surface in terms of separating out some of those programs, where particularly it was where we had to move from initially around the forestry support to when we got COVID coming into country and people being redeployed into different jobs. So that's another piece of the puzzle that sits below quite a high level view of the economic impacts.
Yeah, I do understand that, but that report related to, I think, $23 million, but we spent, based on this, you know, well in excess of that. So, I mean, I credit the authors of the report. It's really good information to have. I was kind of left wanting more. Is probably my comment, because it is really, really critical information, just at a possibly a, you know, we do a lot of spatial planning and all that sort of stuff, and this information is really, really awesome at that level. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Burdick and then Councillor Gregory. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to compliment both Tim's report. It's fairly detailed and quite explicit. I was probably privy to a lot more of the spending as I travel the district, and economically we've done very well, contrary to what others thought. Forestry did an exception, and I quote the Matar Road. I think there was almost $1 million spent getting that up to scratch, and that was PGF funding. Then we come, if we talk about social issues, we come to the millions, and I mean millions, that were put into our marae right across the district, and the upgrade. Those marae would never have been able to afford it. Look what got spent in the city, PGF funding. So from my perspective, I think a vote of thanks to Shane Jones for coming here and dropping this amongst us.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregory.
Thank you. This is a fascinating report, and on the back of the letter that went to the ministers asking for what we are looking for, this sort of backs up how that money was used. However, just following up from what Kerry said, that was my main note too, when I look on page 137, and it says the top industries in Gisborne by FTEs, and forestry is not in there. Why isn't it in there? It does. But we've had information that 1 in 4 people in Gisborne are supported financially through the forestry industry. So forestry FTEs aren't more than 784.
No. So
that just doesn't seem right to
through
me.
the chair, while forestry can be a significant contributor to GDP and have indirect impacts to others that support it, does not directly equate to an FTE. So you can also have a situation where you've got a low number of FTEs and you're in a high value paid job. So it's not directly relatable.
Wow.
Councillor Foster and then those two ladies on the side.
Yeah, thank you. This is a really awesome report, actually, and it just reflects what government input and funding can achieve. You know, we were on one of the lower economic ladders in the country for so long, and all of a sudden with a government investment of $299 million, which hasn't all been spent yet, we have become one of the highest performing regions in the country for quite a while. And business confidence has improved. We just look around, we just see so many more people in this town, and the whole apathy is just lifted. There's so much positivity around the place. So, you can't buy that. And so from a government investment of this amount of money is just incredible. And when you see what the GDP will be, $176 million increase in GDP, 1,500 more jobs, that's for the future. And there's going to be more, because we know what our region's capable of doing. All the different initiatives that have gone into all this funding that wouldn't have come in, $243 million have come in, money that wasn't going to, it wouldn't have come in to help other businesses in any other way. So, you can't, it's incredible. And, when I think back to what our previous papers have been about with the reforms and how much investment a government can do into a region that can spend that money for the benefit of the region, you kind of shake your head about some of these reforms that are coming through, but I don't want to bring that back up again.
Thank you.
But I'm just so supportive, and this reading was absolutely awesome. And for the future of this region, this has set us on a table now that we're just charging. And my question would be, the remainder of the money, is it? I think it's about 100 million. Is it secure? And what is our timelines?
A lot of that would be waka kotahi funding. That my understanding is of that 100 million. I do not know in the March. Yeah, and so I do not know the timeframes around that.
Mr. David Wilson, thank you very much.
Through your worship, the Chief Executive is 100% right. It mainly sits with waka kotahi. So there's about 48 million of that that's sitting with them on some of their state highway improvements. Then they've got some other works that they've got to do as well. Our share is the part that we were discussing yesterday at Finance and Audit. So we've got about 10 that we've got to get through, and that's predominantly East Cape Road and some of the resilience projects.
Kia ora, thank you for that. I'm just going to start on that side because that whole row wants to speak. Today is the speaking day. So Councillor Wharehinga, you start and then you pass the rako over to your neighbour and she'll pass the rako over to Councillor Seymour.
Sure, thank you very much, Your Worship. Really want to commend the paper and our staff. This is what this report tells me is that our council, when our council has the funding and the ability to do so, we're able to perform. And we just absolutely smashed all of that extra mahi, including all of our BAU, as the Mayor had alluded to earlier. As a district, we can really perform when we have that economic investment. And that's kind of where my next comment takes us to, is that was the purpose of that economic investment, which was to create livelihood post this uncertainty around COVID. That putia is no longer there. So we need to have that in mind as we move forward in this high inflationary world without that huge putia of PGF, and we need to start focusing on our balances, our debt and our bottom line, and start tightening up on things in my perspective, because we're like I've mentioned, we're going into a high inflation period. We don't have that investment anymore. We can't rely on that. Even our current lines of investment into our region, I don't feel we can even rely on that. There's so much uncertainty in regards to central government that I don't even feel like we can rely on our current lines of investment from central government into our region. So I don't really want to put a damper on the paper, because the paper actually says some really great things about our council and some really great things about how we're able to knuckle down and do the mahi when we're unable to. I doubt, I just want to put it out into the ether that I don't know if those enablers won't be there moving forward. In fact, there will actually be things that will make it more difficult for us. We need to be prepared for that. And I felt that needed to be said today with this paper. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you for that. Councillor Akawata Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Listen, for me, there are 3 key points from this. Firstly, thank you again for having this paper and having us the chance to debate today or discuss it really. Wanting to know who's it circulated to. So all the industries noted in this paper, if they got a copy of it, is it passed around MSD, etc.? First question.
Yeah, we've just shared this back with the MSD, but I think so, and it's a number of ministries, isn't it? Yeah.
And I'm also writing thank you letters to the ministers who were actively involved in this and sending them this report so that they can see the outcomes. So that's also part, aside from the organisations, we are also reaching out to the ministries that supported us and thanking those specific ministers.
That's always good because it's nothing worse than having a fabulous report and then thinking who's actually read this, because it's highlighting a number of things for me sitting here today. And one of them is, yes, okay, maybe my last question in the previous discussion, central government can and shows it can help regional, provincial New Zealand when it gives us the income, the funding, the pūtea, so we can get to. And that's what this has done. So thank you. But secondly, NEETs are not, you know, those that are not engaged in employment, education and training, our NEETs tribe, because there is a considerable number of our rangatahi that it says in this report had profound impact on. And for me, that is one area, our rangatahi, our youth, one thing Tairawhiti is noted for doing really well, making children, is that we have a young population. We have a youth population that need gainful and skillful in employment space. So we did a lot of work in the redeployment space. So again, thank you to all staff and those involved. How can we continue that? Because I've spoken with police recently about the number of rangatahi young, particularly we've seen in the national framework, a lot of young people in trouble with these raids, etc. And I don't want to see our region have to deal with that type of behaviour ever. I don't want a nation to. But it's just that if we can continue to reinforce the narrative that these rangatahi are valued and can be upskilled, is that something that we can push, you know, feedback? Hey, listen, we were able to see it change, you know, families get lives change when their youth, their young people have employment. So can this can kind of pursue on the NEET's impact? Because the review, the findings from the employment was really positive about the changes to young people. Can that continue?
You know, I think that's a key thing, that the report itself doesn't go into that detail, but I think there's an opportunity for us as a district to better take the findings and go, well, there's some real benefits that accrued to rangatahi, and the sort of social and positive, they mentioned spiritual, cultural positives that came from it as well. So I think moving forward, making sure that we, as the sort of notes in the summary there, to share it with Trust Tairawhiti's Economic Development Unit for that sort of ongoing economic opportunities, but also I think with Rautipu Rawora, the wider, socially minded agencies in the district, to see where the benefits can be continued, in particular for young people. So that'll be, I think that's a sensible move.
Cool. And my third and final point is, when you look at those FTEs, what's at the top? Preschool and school education. Like I said, we're a young population, but you look through that list and it's all food production. And you know, if we're looking at a spatial plan and the region's plans, we should be totally considering that information to what's best for region. Because we know that our agricultural, horticultural, and all the other culturals that are, you know, that are really employing people have long-term sustained roles, because we all need to eat. Food is important. So I would see that's top industries, little captured space there, being a real statement of what this region does do well. It's a producing area, and I'm not anti, you know, certain industries, but when you look at cost to benefit ratios of employment, of cultural, of connection, growing and producing kai and livestock farming has been an inherent part of this region. It's kept us afloat through all those years where it was a bit down on the old, you know, productive kind of economy scales, but it still held us. So I would like to see that put out into the public, the domain, to let people really know what is actually our top industries, because I think that gives good conversational rhetoric wise, that's good narrative to who we are as a region. We produce great people and great kai. So we need to protect those spaces. Kia ora.
Seymour.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a really good report. Thank you for the opportunity to read it and for the council officer's report attached to it. But I'm bullet point 36 on page 123, and we absolutely know that a large proportion of the money went on roads. And where would we be if we hadn't had it? It was fantastic and it served the whole district. But that does say on building and maintaining of new and existing roads. And I just think the new could be a bit misinforming, because we are not the Bay of Plenty or Waikato, where I was last weekend, where there are new roads popping up left, right and centre. Really, we don't have any new roads. We actually might reconstruct the road that is there, but it isn't new road. So can we maybe think about that? Chair, thanks very much. It's great information to have.
Thank you for that. Thank you for a good report, Tim. And Nadine, any last comments before I pass this paper?
Yep, I just I think that the usefulness of the report that we commissioned cannot be underestimated in terms of being able to take away those key points about we're in a district where affordability is an issue. It shows when you remove those barriers that you can achieve growth. And so it also shows when there's targeted funding into kind of provincial New Zealand, you will achieve growth. And it also demonstrates the collective impact that central government, working with communities alongside local government and iwi, who have determined the priorities, which is what we did, we can achieve a lot of good things. So I think that this is a really good example and also a plan that we could be putting to central government about also the future.
Right, thank you for that. I'll move that paper. Do I have a seconded by Councillor Cranston? All in favour? Contrary? Carried. Did you want to make a comment? Thank you.
It is a little bit outside this report, but I just would like to take the opportunity because it does have similarities. Right from day one of being on this council some 16, 17 years ago, the issue that was in front of us was the pool. And the investment into that pool is fantastic. And boy, is that in a nick of time with what's happening with the old pool. So yeah, so while it's outside this report, I think it's a good opportunity to show gratitude for what's happening in that space as well. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Okay, councillors, we move to our last report for the day. Moved by Councillor Akuata-Brown. Thank you, Jade, for joining us. And seconded by Councillor Seymour. So this report has been sent to ministers. Jade, any comments you want to open with, or are you just both of you open for questions? Microphone. Okay, just use your microphone. So councillors, Nadine, thank you.
Through your worship. So this piece of work was initiated not by us, but in an approach to myself around a co-funding with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and given that rail is still very much a part of our bigger plan, if and should Kiwi Rail decide to open that, I thought it was an opportunity that the council would not want to miss, and so we did co-fund the piece of work, and the intention was that the consultants would take the report to ministers to then seek some funding for a business case that would then give rise to further investment into the rail. So just in terms of that's how it came about, and was quite a fast moving piece of work.
Thank you. Councillor Akuata-Brown and Councillor Seymour, questions? Oh my goodie, I can just see the hands going up. I'm going to do standing orders from now on.
So I just want to
keep it nice and short.
Thank you. I want to say thank you. I know that in my time, the space that, you know, my passion to see the rail line, you know, be utilised. And I know that in our talks with bigger picture frameworks of climate change mitigation and use of electric, you know, there's a whole heap of people in this space that are absolutely grateful for this council standing by its decision, you know, to support. I know it's not been easy because of the political nature, but I just want to say thank you from the Rail Action Group and others that have been working in the scenes as such, and I myself as well. But I just wanted to ask, you know, I believe at the Regional Transport Committee, we had someone who uses trucking, etc., but a real support from that space. So where to from here regarding waiting to hear back, but noting that you have got some who are highly, you know, intending on using this, you know, you want to see it as a useful mode of transport for produce, but see it also for other means too. So this report's in front of us. Thank you so much for having the commission, adding your pūtea to it. So where to from here? Our pūtea. Kia ora.
So the intention, well, it's been lodged with the ministers, and it's a waiting game now. So in terms of those processes, it will go back through officials. They'll make a recommendation, then it'll have to go back up through a formal, assuming resolution of the cabinet. It's a $6.38 million request, so it's not insignificant. So it's just, it really is now with the ministers for a response.
Councillor Seymour. Thank you, Madam Chair. It wasn't on the agenda for RTC last week, just before Councillor Brown's benefit, but one of the members did have it, and just because it is quite comprehensive, I just want to provide the information, if you haven't picked it up, that the end game looks like being a lot more expensive than the models that we've seen in the past. But on page 25 of the report, 220 of our report, of the staff report, it is a substantial new tunnel which would take it away from that very slippy area. And so that is part of the cost of it being that much greater. And you just might just save you having to plough through it, find the difference. The photograph on page 25 of the report is really interesting. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor Gregory Cranston Foster.
I have a question and a comment. My question is, who wrote the report? It doesn't, it just says Gisborne Rail Reinstatement updated.
So there are a number of consultants.
Oh.
Through the chair, there were a number of consultants put together on a project team that wrote various parts. It was overseen by a consultant named Chris McKenzie, and sort of included a variety of technical experts, a couple of those previously employed engineers from Kiwi Rail, and it was a combination of that project group that brought the report together.
Thank you. So it's always exciting to see another rail report. Since 2012, I've seen a few, and the thing that changes is the price. Last year in May, we had a guy in here, Morris Fraser, telling us about how a civil idea to fix it was 36 million, and now it's what, about 80 million. So I just wanted to say that.
Councillor Cranston.
Thanks for that. I support the reinstatement of the rail for the fact that I like train, been on some fantastic train journeys right through Asia, Africa, Europe, and it's a great way, and this could be a great opportunity. Secondly, the exporting of our produce from here. Unfortunately, those two factors aren't going to be enough to finance the rail, so it is going to come down to logging. So when I'm looking toward the report, the business case that's in front of us, 6.38 million, fortunately not ours, I just really hope that it is a very complete report. And by that, I mean, it has to go right back to Ruatoria, not just the rail line, because we are aware of what happened when they decided to put forestry right throughout the region. The long-term vision of what we would need on our roads, etc., wasn't there. At the moment, I hear a lot of people still justifying this because it's going to get trucks off the road. It isn't going to get one truck off the road until the day that they take trains up to the extraction sites. What is possibly going to happen is the opposite of that, because the port's done massive expansions and they are going to want to maintain their volume at the port. But then if you reinstate the rail, there's also going to be massive volume requirements there as well. And that's going to require the trucks coming down from Ruatoria to go on those roads even more
damaging, if you like, and also the fact that they've got to get through town. So I want a thorough report, not just from Matawhiro to Wairua or to Napier. I think the report's really got to look at the overall impact of having that freight of logs put into the equation, which is going to impact on Gisborne District Council in the long term. Because, yeah, I mean, I see in the report that they sort of say things like, we've got to do this because we can't get enough drivers. But there is going to be no less requirement for trucks on the roads. So I hope they really do a full analysis which goes off the track and comes back.
So that's not going to happen,
Yeah.
but thank you for that.
Yeah.
Councillor Foster.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really in-depth paper. This is 100 odd pages, and you know, I've been a bit of a rail skeptic over the years because, and I've actually been on the rail line as well on the bikes and seen the dropout and everything, and thinking, oh my goodness, this is going to be huge. But after reading this, I'm actually feeling like there is a possibility, and particularly with Kiwi Rail showing some interest in it as well. So you know, we've got the big expansion happening at the port at the moment. You know, they're talking about 250 40-foot containers of produce coming out of this region a week, you know, for the future. So, and you know, if we see what the PGF is doing and helping our funding, helping some of the industries on our flats and all different horticultural areas and other different businesses, the wood processing. So, you know, we are going to be a big, huge producing region, and we really need to look future of how we're going to get this out of here. And by truck, you know, if you ever travel to Napier, you just see the amount of trucks on the road already. And all the trucking companies are saying, we don't want to buy any more trucks. There's emissions problems. We've got trouble with getting drivers. So, you know, when the trucking companies are telling you this is going to be where the future lies, along with the port, you know, we've got to really look at it seriously. So, you know, I'm really heartened to see this go through, and I do question a $6.5 million business case. The information in here is quite intricate already. So where the other $6.5 million of information is going to come, I guess it's more on the freight and produce for the future. But yeah, it'll be really good to see what that outcome is. But yeah, I really supported this paper. I read every single word because I was so intrigued. And thank you so much.
Councillor Worsnott, thank you.
Thank you. My question is just around, so the Regional Transport Committee was just presented with a proposed strategic review done by Waka Kotahi, or, you know, proposed by Waka Kotahi, of our freight networks with a focus on log transport. And my question is, how does that work, which is 30 years overdue? It's a strategic review looking into, you know, regional. There with they're lumping us in with CNI, which is probably not ideal, but the whole impetus behind it is to take a regional view and say, hey, look, if we were to be strategic about this, how would we transport logs? How does that body of work connect to the likes of this report, or how do we make them connect? Is there an opportunity for that?
Thank you, Nadine.
Yep, through your worship. So my assumption is that through the process that will go through, and Ms. Stewart has a copy of this report, Waka Kotahi and the Ministry of Transport will be engaged, and depending on whether the ministers choose to invest in a detailed business case, this will be taken into account. Keep in mind also that as part of the process moving forward, our regional land transport will create those linkages across the various modes. So from not only the logging factor, but also I think considering around the rail and the potential for barging as well, that will all get updated as we move forward in this process.
Thank you.
Okay. Go, Tony.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say. Yeah, look, fantastic, exciting, something a number of us have advocated for a long time. I do wonder about the price tag, given some quite extraordinarily detailed, comprehensive reports have been produced particularly by the Gisborne Rail Action Group. But again, I said earlier, this government seems to be taking some aspirational approach to things, and when the trucking industry themselves say this is the way to go, then maybe it's time for people to sit up and listen. So really excited, and this is a really wonderful day for Tairawhiti, and hopefully this results in real action.
Okay, thank you for that. So now that everyone's making a comment, I am going to run standing orders, people. One thing I wanted to say, as leaders, it is our job to advocate for all our transport networks, because our network is fragile. So for us, we need to look at how do we get the best air service into, and we work actively with Air New Zealand on that. Roading, we work with Waka Kotahi. With rail, we're now working with our neighbours. Walking and cycling is something we are constantly backing with Waka Kotahi and getting input from our community. There's some talk with the government, PGF, about barging. So for us as community leaders, we need to make sure we get as robust a network for our region as possible. And this to me is just one other link into that, where we try and make sure we cover all our bases. So then when something happens, we always have another option to get produce or people in and out of our region. Taking climate change into account, this is a good step forward. And I do want to thank our CEO for working closely, and for Jade, she's been our link with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council as well as the Wairua Council. I have a mover in Councillor Akwata Brown, seconded by Councillor Seymour, all in favour, contrary, carried. I do want to thank everyone for today's meeting. There's a lot, chunky agenda, lots to read, lots to process. Thank you, staff. I declare this meeting closed. Well, I won't declare this meeting closed then. I will just say, moved by Councillor Seymour, seconded by Councillor, we move into public excluded. Thank you.